Hey guys, what's up? This is Stacking Chairs, a youth ministry podcast all about serving in youth ministry. Whether it be youth group or youth camp, whatever God has you serving in, that's what we're talking about. I'm one of your hosts, Josh Paul Hemus. I'm joined by my fellow host and good friend,
Kyle Gray. Josh, it is good to be back, man. I know we just took a week off.
We took a week off.
Yeah. We've got Pursuit Camp going on right now. Listen,
is that happening this weekend?
It is happening this weekend. Who's that?
Who was that other voice that just popped in?
Hey, ladies and gentlemen, our speaker for weekend one of Pursuit Camp back for the third time. Is this the third or is this the fourth?
This would technically be 3.5.
3.5?
Because
it's my excitement scale for being here.
I believe, and we could check in with your subscribers who listen all the time.
Yeah,
I've done two by
all
myself.
13,000 of them.
And then what could be my third time was with my boss, Debbie Brasina, the president of Share Ministry. So we kind of coded that one, but she was more. And then here we are today. So
this is the fourth then.
Yeah.
So
not even Brian Baker. And I think Brian Baker holds the second seed spot for he's done at least two with us.
I don't think so. I think Dylan did
Hang
more.
on just a second. I need to text
What?
Brian Baker.
Just let Brian know.
That's crazy.
Yeah, did you see
just
the video?
so you know, ladies and gentlemen, you could be the new holder of the record of being on the podcast.
Yeah, shoot us an email at stackingchairspod@WOL.
Let us know you want to be on it. Josh, I feel like I can say that because I don't think have we gotten any emails at that email address?
Yeah.
Oh, forgive me.
Quite a few.
Don't email Josh.
Yeah, no, email us, stackingchairspod.
Anyway, so we are in Pursuit Camp season. We're about to jump into weekend one.
Mm-hmm.
There's a little bit of a buzz, man. There's a little bit of an excitement around here, and I love that happens while camp goes on. But the crazy thing is at wintertime, nothing else shuts down.
Yeah.
I mean, the Bible Institute is still in full operation. Every work area is still in full operation. During the weeks, we have conference center guests here. We'll have retreats here. And so it's just like, whew.
Every morning there's a conference meeting going on, and then there's concerts on Thursday nights still. Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, I don't know if you noticed this. If you are a stacker, by the way, I just made that.
That's what we're calling
That's what we're calling
That's
our
fantastic.
Thank you.
The listeners and subscribers,
they're
you guys are
stackers.
stackers.
Yeah.
Which is true, because youth ministry stacking chairs.
They're out there stacking chairs.
Exactly.
You just came up with
I did. Listen. By the way, I can no longer be creative for the rest of the day. Don't expect
you're
anything.
done now.
But if you're a stacker and you listened 2 episodes ago, there was a moment where I had to get up and leave the podcast and come back. And so you can really tell if you are watching. Josh, where can they watch?
You can watch on our fellowship YouTube channel. We have all the episodes of Stacking Chairs on there, and then also some other content that we produce for Word of Life. You can see what the ministry looks like around the world.
So, Josh, we're getting into Pursuit Camp season.
Yeah. What's Jason doing here for
Pursuit Camp?
Oh, that's right.
Pursuit Camp?
So, like I said, Jason is weekend one speaker. I thought I already said that. Did not.
Did he say that?
We're glad you're here with us today.
I wasn't paying
Josh,
attention.
welcome to Stacking Chairs.
I'm a stacker.
So good to have you.
I don't know that you are a
I'm not
stacker
a
if you
stacker.
totally
Not
missed that.
listening, Yeah. Man.
So there's another podcast that's asking me to come and be a guest on it.
Yeah.
And I have listened to almost all their episodes. It's my buddies over at Sunday Cool. Ninjas Are Butterflies.
Oh, cool.
And no, it'd be a lot of fun. But I said, hey, just so you know, have you guys noticed you have mentioned the movies Interstellar and Lord of the Rings on every episode from one episode on, and they're like, we're going to stop doing that. I was like,
No, that's a
I
good
don't think
reference.
so. I was sitting there going like, well, what are the little things that we've never noticed that every single time we've mentioned? And the only thing I can think that we've never talked about is planning meetings. You guys should have a time to get together and plan with your church.
He mentions it every episode. Every episode. It's a good policy. You should be having planning meetings.
So Josh, we're getting into camp.
Yeah.
If you're in youth ministry, you may not do camp.
Yeah.
But you've got some type of an event. In fact, that's kind of what the whole gist of the ministry name 51 kind of centered around, because typically there's that one event. Sometimes churches have multiple events, but there's that one event that happens 1 week out of the year that you kind of, gather everything else around. And it's a high point for a lot of people. It's a missions trip or it's a camp. But Josh, the biggest part that I've talked to people about, and obviously Jason, you're here too, so I don't want to just talk to Josh, but to gather people or to pull off these events is to have the right counselors or co-leaders or people that go on those trips. Like time and time again, as I'm talking to people, it really, that's where the stressor is, right? And Jason, you work for Dare to Share, but you're a leader in your youth group. Have you gone on any of these trips and
Yeah, I mean, so 20 plus years of ministry experience, half of that being at Dare to Share, half of it in the local church. And so have very much been volunteer, part-time, full-time youth leader serving in different capacities and having that big trip come up or that big event. And so totally understand the planning, the stressors of that. And then to your point at Dare to Share, we have 2 events that would fall into this space. We do something called Lead the Cause, which is a week-long event out in Denver, Colorado at Colorado Christian University, where we host students for the week. And it's a leadership evangelism training week. And so those youth groups and students are with us for that whole week. And then Dare to Share Live, which is more of a national simulcast, you do it locally. So much more of the responsibility is local other than the program piece. So we've done events from a Dare to Share perspective a couple of different ways in terms of what pressure may be on the youth leader to plan and prepare for it. But then, everything from the DNOW weekend to the, I wish I had figured out I didn't have to do lock-ins before I turned 25.
I thought that was written into everybody's contract. Must do a lock-in.
Must do. Yeah.
Hey, so you have sat on that.
Good to know now.
Right.
You have sat on that other side. Sorry, you're on my court. I'm like, you would know that if you're watching the video. But so you have been on the side of having to organize all the leaders, go after where for you where did you look? Where did you pull from? Were there any like go-tos like, all right, if I'm going to go for counselors, I'm going to go to these people, or was it like, how did you gather those?
Yeah, I think one of the things I looked for early on in youth ministry, and I had context because I had worked at Centrifuge summer camps for Lifeway when I was in college and did a summer camp counselor with them for a summer. That's actually where I met my wife, which was super awesome.
Oh, cool.
See, God does do differences that make differences that can.
Yeah, he does. But what I learned from that experience being a counselor and being a college-age counselor was that was a huge win for me as a young youth pastor, is finding a camp where counselors were provided.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't say it was so much that I could just show up with my group and send my kids off and kind of check out for the week, but it was nice to know that need was being met. I did a couple summer camp / mission trips where they might have had a small logistic team that was running the event, but you still were like hands-on with your kids serving as that counselor role for the week. And so I've done it both ways. I've served on both sides. Again, Lifeway Centrifuge camps where I was the counselor. Again, our Lead the Cause event that we host where we run program and we have structure, but it is on the youth leader to be that counselor for the week. And so I kind of seen it done every which way. And they all have merits. It kind of depends on what you are looking for as a youth leader.
Well, and I think that's interesting because we sit on that other side here at Word of Life where, and I'll tell guys all the time, listen, we want to help you to accomplish what you value in a way that adds value to your ministry, but in a way that you don't have to organize or do it all yourself.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, literally the amount of stress that I talk to some of these guys about, all right, do you have your chefs? Do they have the food?
Right.
Do they have the, so case in point for us, we've had a girl who's done a phenomenal job, worked in one of the hospitals around here, who a couple years ago said, hey, I'll step up and be your head nursing coordinator. And so she would gather them, but I still knew I had to still touch base with her to go, okay, hey, where are we at?
Yeah, right.
And there was sometimes her contact, well, that's just in the area of nursing. Now you got to go, if you're putting your camp together. Now, there are some guys that they just thrive on that and they just do a really, really good job. Yeah. And so some of them are like, dude, I can put that together. Yeah. Just because you can doesn't mean you have to. But man, I mean, you're thinking chefs, you're thinking cleanup people, you're thinking nursing, you're thinking that, and that's above and beyond even just
program activities, Bible study, content, everything else.
And then you got the counselors,
right?
The counselors. So the guys that I've spoken to that organize their own and gather contacts. Maybe somebody's listening here today going, hey, we do our own camp. And I'm just trying to figure out where can I gather people. First and foremost, did you start with your own personal youth leaders?
Say that again.
When you were gathering workers to be a part of your camp or your ministry,
when I was a youth pastor and we were doing our own event, did I start with my
Did you start with your adult volunteers?
Yeah, so there's a couple different ways that we had done that. That was a go-to way for sure, was leaning on the adults that we already had, especially when we had a thriving small group ministry, because then the small group leaders are already investing in those kids' lives. And so it's a deeper dive with that. There's also something that I took advantage of in several Christian universities, and not all of them, but several of them do offer like mission teams of college students that will come and help support your D-Now weekend or winter retreat.
Cool.
And so there were a couple of times where we actually had a team of 6 or 8 college students come to do a D-Now weekend. So I was able to take some of that burden off of my adult leaders and lean on those college students where we were still in proximity to them, but it gave a different voice for our students to listen to. It was, the new people in town, these college kids to come in. So it was a new relationship for our kids to have. And so that worked really well. Yeah. And so there's a variety of things. I think Kyle and Josh, one of the things that I would say of why I think this is a good conversation to have to help youth leaders think through. We've done some research at Dare to Share, just the landscape of youth ministry, specifically here in the United States, but we're also seeing it around the world. 70% of churches do not have a vocational youth leader on staff. 70% of churches in the United States, it is a volunteer, or they would say they don't even have a youth leader, even though somebody's probably teaching a Sunday school class or Bible study.
Has that gone up over the past couple of years or gone down?
It's continuing to go up. And so 70%, and the margin is pushing higher and higher. And so of the remaining 30% though, 2/3 of that, or 20% of the whole, is part-time and bivocational. Yeah. And so anybody who's getting $100 check a month for doing something to actually put in 20. And then so only 10% of youth leaders in the United States are actually full-time vocational. And then what's really crazy is of that 10%, about half are exclusively focused on youth ministry in their churches. Others are youth and children, or youth and worship, or youth and discipleship. Yeah. And so I look at this, and the youth leaders that we serve, and again, the growing number of them being volunteer and bivocational, is the more that can be provided for them in an environment like this, the better. Yeah. Because think about it, that volunteer youth leader, it's some weeks all they can do just to get there on a Wednesday night to get through Bible study. And so now you're saying, well, what are you doing for summer camp? Like, why take that on when there's so many opportunities to find things that could.
Well, and I definitely think, I mean, not a shameless plug, because we're very upfront about it. Listen, this is what we can provide. Yeah. There's absolutely, and you already said this, but there's positives and negatives on both sides. Yeah. And I was thinking about this as we were kind of going through, just writing down, okay, so there are two options: either you provide the people, or the people are provided for you. Really are the only two.
Yeah. And maybe to varying degrees, too.
But then there's positives and negatives. And honestly, as I was writing it down, like, every positive is also a negative. And every positive on one side. So like one side, you have to vet the people. The other side, you didn't get a chance to vet the people. Yeah. On the one side, hey, you know the people, but the negative is you know the people. Right. Because let's be honest, how many of us, and I'm sure you've been in this spot, you put together the dream team, everything just aligned, it was great, and then that one key leader, dude, I can't go. Right. And you have to bring in that other person that, let's just be honest, it's not that you're like, I would never let this guy go, but you're just like, I really didn't want to have to ask this person, And well, here's
I don't work with people like that. I don't know what you're talking about.
Josh, you do the podcast with me. I know. That's right. No, but listen, I make a promise to our churches that come. Yeah. That I might not want to have every one of the counselors be the counselor for my children. I might go, I would prefer not. But if there's anybody that I go, there's no way. Yeah. There's no way, unless Jesus showed up on my bed, and even then I might have a long conversation with him. There's no way I would let this kid be a counselor over one of my girls or one of my boys. Then I'm not going to let them be a counselor at all. But guess what? That doesn't mean people aren't going to have an off week. Sure. I mean, Josh, your youth group showed up. Yeah. Tell me that your church didn't have, at some point in some way, a bad experience here and there. It wouldn't surprise me if you said you guys even had a problem with a counselor. In fact, I know you have, because we've had a conversation. So I'm setting you up, Josh.
Do you really want me to
do it? Why not?
All right. Stackers, it's about to get real.
Yeah,
because Josh, we're about to
came over the table.
You would know that if you were watching it.
Let me preface
this
by
Josh
saying,
is going to.
Yeah. Let me preface this by saying that this situation was handled to the fullest extent that it could have been. And that Word of Life, obviously I work for Word of Life, so I have to say this, but also I want to say this, that like Word of Life took care of the situation to the best of their ability. But I I didn't expect to be saying this story exactly.
You don't have to go in detail.
No,
Don't air the dirty laundry.
Of course not. But I was going to.
But the person's name
I want
is.
to know that the dirty, because now I know there's dirty laundry.
No, it's not that bad. It wasn't that bad.
Tell us what happened.
Yeah, so
just tell us.
I was going to say, a camp that I heard a story about, but here's the truth.
Let's own it.
Yeah, so we did have a situation where one of the counselors was, I would just say, making jokes that we wouldn't deem as appropriate.
Yeah, sure.
And so now some of our kids now, like, they've heard some of these jokes that got brought to the attention, and parents are then talking to our youth pastor and saying like, hey, what's going on? We have this kid who's making these inappropriate jokes, and now we're hearing about it, and like our kids now are making these, and obviously they're not going all the way to the point, but it was all taken care of. You know what I mean? Like, I want to make sure to preface that. So
you hit on something that's a really good example of the whole positive, negative at the same time. Mm-hmm. So here's one of the wins of, and I'll speak to y'all's format specifically and being here at Pursuit Camp, and just personal connection. Like, my son is at the Bible Institute this year, so he is going to be a counselor this weekend as I'm preaching, which is super cool. Yeah. So there's this win or positive for a youth group that you've got 19 to 22-year-old kids that at the very least, they're trying to figure it out. They're seeking the Lord. They're seeking calls to ministry. And so your students, 12 to 17-year-olds, are in proximity and get to be around these kids that are, to the best of their ability, loving after Jesus, pursuing. They're going to have an off week, but they get to be influenced by that 18, 19, 20-year-old is the point. So then you do get that 19-year-old,
who's going to act
just wasn't thinking in the moment and forgot they were hanging out with 14-year-olds and says something inappropriate. Yeah. That 14-year-old is going to repeat it because they're looking up to that kid to be influenced. Now that's
and they thought it was funny.
And they thought it was funny. Yeah. But that's also the same 19, 20-year-old kid who is opening the Word of God with them, praying over them for the week. So again, on a personal connection to this, and why I love that my son gets to be in a role like this is a church that I was serving at, that I was youth pastor when he was in late elementary school. He was volunteering for younger elementary in tech. Yeah. And it was one of our interns, a 20-year-old college student who did tech for that environment, would meet with Christian, train him on how to do pro presenter and sound, all this kind of stuff. And so my son got to benefit as a 10, 11, 12-year-old of this 20, 21-year-old investing in his life. And that had a huge impact. I have no doubt that that's a piece of my son's story of seeking God's call in his life to ministry, because it was modeled for him by that 18, 19, 20-year-old over those couple years as he was doing it. And so that is such a huge win. We just have to own that in the church, discipleship's going to be messy. Yeah, because people are broken and messy, but your kids get to be in the proximity of other kids that are older kids that are at least trying to figure it out.
Yeah. Well, and so again, and here's the hard part. Yeah. Hard part is what's acceptable to you may or may not be acceptable to me, which may or may not be acceptable to you. Now, here's the deal. I know that situation. Yeah, and we talked about that situation.
No one accepted it.
Nobody accepted it. That's not on topic. Yeah. But let me say this. The hard thing is there are more situations than not, which is just, hey, everywhere you go, you're going to run into those different things. Name from me one church that has not had a youth pastor who stood up and said, I mean, is that not the joke that the youth pastor himself is going to stand up and say something stupid or go do something dumb, and people are like, well, that's just the youth pastor.
Most youth pastors, I don't think any of our stackers would
none of our stackers. None of our stackers.
I mean, I drove some of our kids to an event.
You stack, you're not a stacker.
Yeah, you're right. So I drove some of our kids to an event, and I don't know, I was so stupid. I drove over the speed limit, and like, it doesn't sound like a big deal, but I was going faster than I should have on a road that already goes fast. And, the kids are like egging me on, and they're like faster, faster. And so I hit, we're passing this truck. And so I went way faster than I should have. Well, first thing I thought of, I was like, oh man, I told the kids, I said, the first thing I thought was say, don't tell your parents I did that.
Exactly.
And I caught myself, didn't say that, fortunately. Good job. And then they went and told their parents, Josh went 90 miles an hour on the highway. And I had to answer for that. And I had to go. And now every time we're in the car together going on an event, they're like, you going to speed? And I go, no. And listen, I need you to know, and every time I apologize again for it. But here's the thing. That was 2 years ago working with the kids in our youth group, and they still bring it up to this day.
Well, sure.
Right.
And I think my point in that is we're going to make mistakes. We need to constantly be pushing back and say, hey, you know what? I did make this mistake, but they're going to remember it. So they're going to remember those things.
Can I key on that real quick? Just because it does bring, because, and I, as a youth pastor, driving 15 passenger vans, like
Yeah.
And I did not have. I'm not as bad a sinner as you are, Josh. I did not.
He only
have
went
that.
83.
However, but what I learned from that is. And I think it's the growing and discipling opportunity of a young leader, a college student who's being a counselor, is what you have to learn in those moments is it's really not about you and what you want to do and your preferences. Humor that you might think is okay when you're with your buddies or, on your own when you're driving and you want to go 10 over the speed limit, like that's on you.
Yeah.
When you put other people's kids in the car.
Absolutely.
When you have other people's kids in your small group. And I think, and maybe I didn't do that as a great job when I had opportunity to prep and lead college students in that capacity, but something I've learned is I think that's a conversation, and it doesn't have to be long, but it needs to happen. And I would assume happens with the BI students is they're about to be counselors this weekend at Pursuit Camp. Is, this is not about you. These are somebody else's kids. They come from different churches. And so you at least do what you can to say, here's the bar.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so I think that's part of it too, on the other side
Right.
for those counselors of some accountability and responsibility that comes with that opportunity.
Well, and I'll tell you what, now that I have my 2-year-old daughter, well, almost 2, that whole story, like when I think back, when I thought back, and then I was like, oh man, I'm embarrassed. I made a mistake. Now when I think back, I don't get emotional but it's more of just like, man, I'm responsible for these kids. And
you got a kid now, and you'd be ticked if somebody did that with your kid in the car.
And so like, I feel like shame. I feel absolute shame for it. And I apologize profusely to the parents.
Well,
but I don't do it again.
But the problem is this. The problem is this. Okay. Again, let's talk about something as absolutely simple as the movies you watch and the shows you watch, the movies you reference.
Yeah. Okay. We talked about that on the podcast before.
The music you listen to.
Yeah.
So again, think about forget the context of this is a youth leader that's coming to be a counselor for this weekend or for this event, or at D Now's, Josh, we all pile up over to your house. You're just the host home. Yeah. Okay. Or you have the outside college counselor that's there. Okay. So very easy thing, right? Any of those people could say, oh yeah, we're watching this show. Or we show up from the D Now, we come back to our host home, and you as the guy at your own home are watching something that you don't have a problem with. Yeah. But now you've got a kid that's in that room, in that cabin. Again, you could be a youth leader. You could be somebody at your house and show up, and that kid's like, dude, I just went and watched, I watched Ant-Man. Just watch Ant-Man. Oh yeah, dude, I love that movie. Yeah. And there's other kids like, oh, you watch Ant-Man and then go back, and you're like, that's not the degree to which the stupidity of the joke that was made. And I get that. Yeah. But unfortunately, that can start down a road and go to a place, because now you're talking about, remember when Tommy Boy came out? Were you still alive when Tommy Boy?
Was he still alive, or was he born?
Was he born yet?
I think it came out in the 90s. I think I was.
So I remember, let me tell you how we convinced our youth pastor we convinced our youth pastor when we were on a winter retreat to watch Dumb and Dumber.
Nice.
Okay. He had never seen it.
Oh no.
And so he was like, well, if the pastor's son is saying we ought to watch Dumb and Dumber, we ought to watch Dumb and Dumber. Dude, he was so embarrassed. I think he was so angry, but he was like embarrassed angry that he was like, oh my goodness. I'm pretty sure that right after that we watched like Aladdin.
Yeah.
He was like,
before the internet. What was he going to do?
Yeah. And so again, I think what we're talking about here is when you're gathering leaders, or if you're going to a camp that you have full right to ask about, hey, what's the training that's gone in?
That's true.
What's, and again, I would urge you, if you're going to gather your own counselors, even if they're your own youth leaders, don't just presume they have the training that they need to step in. Yeah. We've actually played around with the idea of, because at Pursuit Camp, you as an outside leader can step in and be a counselor for your group. Yeah. We try never to put
I was gonna ask about that.
two churches, if your church and Jason's church showed up, we never try to put your church and Jason's church in where either of you are in as leaders. Yeah. But if you show up with your group, we'll put a Bible Institute student or two with you as the youth leader. Yeah. But we've played around with the idea of sending those churches, oh, you have counselors? Here's our counselor training. And we require you, if you want to be in the cabin, to sit in the counselor, because there's a chance, Josh, that we may have to put a outside, person that shows up on their own in that cabin, and now the same exact thing that your youth guy was asking, who was going like, wait, I don't know these people. Well, I say that same exact thing about his leader.
No, that's right. That's reasonable.
And so on that thing, I think number one, you got to ask yourself, what training am I providing for the people? Yep. I think I've got to ask myself, what's the character of the person that I'm putting in that situation?
Yeah.
Which, let's be honest, goes back to that whole idea of, do you know your leaders? Are you doing accountability with your leaders?
Yeah.
Are you watching the different things in the direction of your leaders? And then the third thing I think you got to ask is, regardless of the situation of if you bring in your leaders or you go to a place that has leaders for you, what's your follow-up plan? Not if something goes wrong, but when something goes wrong.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Sure.
Well, and I think that
because
training,
it's gonna happen.
yeah, and that training is important because Word of Life has a very rigorous child protection policy.
my goodness,
and we take it very seriously, very, very seriously, and I'm glad for that.
Yeah.
But if I had a youth leader coming in as Word of Life, I would want to know that they're going to follow that to the
absolutely.
T, because we have those things set up in such a way that like any misstep is like, I mean,
Well, we've removed people from counseling.
Yeah.
We've sent people home. We've had, and it's sad. And one of the worst parts about my job is sitting across the table from somebody and going, what in the world's going on? And when they sit there, and I get it, and Josh and Jason, I've been there where I've looked at a person and said, I know you're sitting here going, it's not that big of a deal.
yeah, it was just a joke.
It's just a joke. It's not that big of a deal. Here's the worst. It's not that big of a deal. They started the conversation.
Right.
Yeah.
Because that 14-year-old became the standard by which you live in that moment.
Well,
Like, that's the reality.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Or that 18-year-old kid
Right.
Yeah.
in the
No,
cabin
totally.
started the conversation. Not even one of my counselors, but that 18-year-old kid.
Yeah, exactly.
Or let me take it to pursuit. That other youth leader
Yeah.
started that conversation in the cabin.
Yeah.
I was telling you two guys about a situation where I actually watched a youth leader at a camp that I was at, that I was spending some time at. I watched a youth leader of a local church lift up a boy and throw him on the ground to wrestle him. And I remember being like, what the heck is going on?
Yeah.
I remember interacting with the youth pastor of that, and he was like, oh, dude, that's him and that kid's like, they rough and tumble with each other.
Yeah.
Okay, again, now let me put it in the context of if any of my counselors ever went down with, I'd be like, excuse me.
Yeah. Well, that's very against our child protection policy.
So, well, and it's against my no combat at camp.
Yeah, no, we have a specific rule for that. No combat.
We have a rule of that. And so again, it's like,
it fits in the 4 C's. That's why it's combat, not
hey,
fighting.
I love you so much. Here's your ticket home. Thank you so much for your service.
I think in the midst of this conversation today on the podcast, we've had 2 conversations for our stackers.
Yeah.
For our stackers to track with. One is when you're planning or picking an event, what are you looking for? And we kind of started with this idea of counselor versus no counselor provided. Is that something that you recruit your own leaders to do? Do you look for that in a ministry that provides that? And it really does come kind of to your own ministry philosophy of what you're looking for. And in the midst of that, then we talked about some pros and cons of either way that you might go with that. And that's where kind of this second conversation emerged of even as we in our local churches are recruiting volunteer leaders, adults, and even student leaders, what are the standards that we hold them to? What are our expectations? And I think one of the things that it just always comes down to is clear communication is so critical in any of these situations. And so as I'm recruiting volunteers, am I clearly explaining the standards for them? Whether that comes by way of a leadership covenant of here's the do's and don'ts that you're committing to, which I would advocate for, that can be really helpful. I know at our church, I go to Storyline Church in Arvada, Colorado. Every 2 years as a volunteer in our Next Gen ministry, I have to go through a ministry safe course. It's multiple videos and quizzes. You got like, it's a rigorous and background check is all of that. And so there's also, in addition to standards, there's just the vetting process of background side of things. And so as a youth leader then, where that applies back to the camp is you trust a Word of Life that they've done that not only with their staff, but also these BI students have been vetted to some degree, understand what's expected of them. And so I think those are kind of the 2 different tracks as a youth leader. You know, how does this apply to me as I'm sitting here listening to this is, one, when it comes to planning events, retreat weekends. You know, I again, after over a decade in local church ministry, over 20 years of just ministry experience, advocate for ministries that bring their strengths to the table of putting on events that at least program content activities are taken care of and planned for you. In addition, a Word of Life, a pursuit camp or summer camp where there's also counselors as well. It's just a huge win. For your kids to be under that influence, be exposed to those different things. And as we've talked about, there's risks sometimes involved in that, but such a great experience. But then also the but what's the reasonable expectation of any volunteer leader within my ministry or camp or whatever of what I'm hoping will be protected? Does that make sense? You tracking?
Yeah.
No, and I think the hard thing is, and this genuinely is no matter what standard you're going to set, you know, you got to fight against allowing yourself to scramble.
Yep.
I have to fight against you know what, God's going to provide the counselors. So I don't have to. And I remember this was a couple years ago. And again, we still have problems. And it's always the most disheartening ones are the ones that you're like, dude, it's Josh Palhamus. Like, Josh, you set such a high standard. I know, dude, it was one time I said one thing stupid that could literally change the direction of your summer ministry.
Yeah.
But the other
only drove 25 miles over the speed limit that one time.
It was 20. It was 20. Give me that extra 5. Come on.
But having the opportunity to go, listen, I don't have to scramble.
Yeah.
I don't have to scramble. I would rather go, you know what? No, if as I'm praying about it, as I'm praying about the situation, or as I'm praying about gathering these counselors, gathering these different people, I'm going to make sure that I go, if I don't feel a peace about Josh, I'm not going to bring Josh.
Yeah.
You know, that is honestly one of the huge strengths that I love about having these churches bring their people in.
Sure.
And we ask these churches to make sure, hey, you've run a background check on all the people that you're going to put in the cabin. Yeah. And that's why we do our dead level best to never put anybody that is not from that church in that cabin if they put a youth leader present.
Yeah. Right.
Just because that's life. That's, you know, that's prudent. But it's just, guys, I think we have to understand, and I'm realizing this more than ever now that I'm working with that local church. We live in a different world, in a different time, with different criteria that we joked around about those kids not being able to be in Harry Potter world. If you've been in ministry for 20 years, there was a day and time where if you were in Christian ministry, you did not watch Harry Potter. I mean, you did not have a part of that at all. And other people today, you know, some people, some of you are out there going, you even mentioned the movie that shall not be named, you know.
See what you
you see what I did there. But it's a different world. It's a different situation.
Well, and I'd even say the other side of that 20 years ago, and we used to joke about it in youth ministry and recruited volunteers to this way. It was kind of like, if you love Jesus and have a pulse, we'll take you in youth ministry.
Seriously.
Like, because you're so hungry for volunteers.
Yep.
And now it's like, if you love Jesus and have a pulse and have gone through a background check and we've known you for 2 years and like go down there. And again, I'm very much pro, like, because we've learned from horrible circumstances, those type of things need to be in place. And so you have to do due diligence. But I mean, I think that's a big takeaway. Like, as you serve in the local church and you're going to put students under somebody's leadership, as you recruit volunteers in your local church, as you look to other ministries to provide a camp or event service, or even when you partner with another church to do something locally, asking that question of how they've been vetted, clearly communicating what the expectations are, and then accepting that if I put my middle school or high school student under the leadership of a 19-year-old college student or a 49-year-old adult volunteer, and I have expectations that reflect and embrace, I intentionally put them under that 19-year-old's responsibility with my oversight, but and have that calibrated expectation, if you will, and understanding what that's going to look like. That there's going to be risk, but there's, I even think of my own youth group experience and the older kids in high school when I was in middle school, college age students that served our youth, like that had significant impact in my life. And so you got to find what's comfortable, what works for you, but I certainly would not advocate throwing the baby out with the bathwater.
No.
You know what I'm saying?
No, I agree. And I think as a youth leader, if you're looking at a youth group, if you're looking at a camp, it's not only your prerogative, but it's your responsibility to make sure you're vetting those things. Call if you have to. I mean, word of life, we have people who you can talk to and make sure that those things are the case.
So back in 2015, Tommy Sewell and I, Tommy's the camp director up at Word of Life Island. Up in New York. Tommy and I went through and toured with Jay Sanders and Joel Corrales. We toured through 6 camps in Texas, large, small, toured through 6 camps in Texas and said, hey, where do you get your counselors? You know, what's your secret sauce? What's your, the thing that makes you guys tick? What's the best game you've ever run? What's the thing that you're like, we stopped doing this while? It was awesome. It was incredible. The amount of camps out there that have little to no connection with any of their counselors outside of, I showed up at Liberty, I showed up at Colorado Christian, I'm just recruiting and saying, it would be like the way that we used to gather youth leaders. Hey, are you an idiot? Dude, come and serve. Dude,
you free this weekend? We got an event. Come on.
Do you like being stupid? Come on, let's go. Listen, and I know, but I remember one time we sat down with one of the youth leaders or one of the camp directors, and we said, hey, where do you get your people from? And he goes, well, I have a team. They go to, and he rattled off 5 different colleges. Some of them were Christian, some of them were not Christian.
Yeah.
Listen, I'm not opposed to getting counselors from a secular university. There are still people that love Jesus with all their heart and go to secular universities.
Of course.
But he said, guys, to my failure, we needed to change our vetting process.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And he told us some stories of people that they brought in and weeks into camp realized that there were things that were going on, that there were things that they were doing outside on their day off there. And I'm watching this guy going, here's the benefit that I at least get to watch these kids all year.
Absolutely.
I at least get to interact with these kids all year. I cannot even begin to imagine what's that conversation when that kid gets home. And I said to our counselors the other day, here's what I need you to realize. Whatever stupid thing that goes on and you're like, it's not that big of a deal, is the very first thing that comes out of that kid's mouth when they get in. They could have had a soul redefining week. And for some reason, hey, tell us about your week, Billy. Well, let me tell you what my counselor said. Hey, my counselor did blah, 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 blah. Yeah. And you're like, dude, what? You know. But now you don't even know that kid. Mm-hmm. You brought that. I mean, and I wanted to go. Is that because you guys are like, hey, I washed my hands of it. I didn't know them. Yeah. It's just, listen, it's tough. And so for you guys that are planning your own events, that are putting them together, we are praying for you.
Yeah.
It's a hard process. Mm-hmm. I think there's positives and negatives about pulling in youth leaders or pulling in people from your local church. I think there's positives and negatives about going to a camp that does not have their people around them all year long and they bring them in. I think there's positives and negatives about our situation where we have these kids all year long and we bring them in. Let's say this on the table. There's no perfect situation.
No, of course not.
And number 2, in every single one of those situations, there's a potential for something to go wrong.
Absolutely.
But I think just like Jason said, what is the resources that you're providing through the training? Yeah. What's your vetting process? Yep. And then what's the plan in play if and when something goes wrong?
Yep.
Yeah.
And I think, Josh, that's where I walk away from that situation and I don't feel like I have to apologize anytime I interact with Matt or any time I interact with you because while I wish I knew Dr. Emmett L. Brown and I could go back and I could change that thing from ever happening, Back to the Future.
Nice.
I didn't get that reference. I'm young. I'm young.
That's why this right now in this moment is why you are not and will never be a stacker.
I should have been vetted.
You should. We should. Wait. What movies have you watched? Are you allowed to walk into Harry Potter world, Josh? But listen, I can't change the past.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, for sure.
But what happened from that? Mm-hmm. And I had a boss that said to me, Kyle, don't neglect the fact that you can learn great lessons from bad times.
Sure.
Or bad examples or bad leadership. But I would say, yes, it absolutely reminds us who are in charge that James 3:1, let not many of you be teachers because you will be held to a stricter standard.
And I think the last thought I would give you that when it comes to, and this is something I love about partnering with We're Live coming to Pursuit Camp, the quality of BI students and just an encouragement I would give to youth leaders at home, whether you're doing your own event or how you look at other ministries that are providing this. We've talked about accountability. We've talked about vetting. I think at Dare to Share, we call it gospel advancing leaders, but it's simply somebody who shares the gospel personally and then mobilizes young people to do the same. So there's a heart and a missional alignment that kind of comes over all of those things. And so at the end of the day, even like a ministry heart for Christ standard or criteria, because now I know my 14-year-old, right? Even though 19-year-old is going to say something, screw up as a counselor, and they're 19. Yeah. But if I know that 19-year-old is all about sharing the gospel personally and mobilizing teens to do the same, that at least that standard is there. Yeah. In which I know that influence is going to have impact on my students. And so I think that's just another lens to think through. Yeah. In addition to the safety concerns and all the things that we've talked about today, is the ministry or the people, even in my local church that I'm recruiting into my ministry that are going to have influence on my kid. Yeah. Are they ultimately about the main thing.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Well, I think that kind of wraps us up. We're going to, any other thoughts before we move into small group here?
No, I think I think we've said, listen, and here's what I love, Josh, when you brought this topic up, it could essentially be a little bit of an uncomfortable one because I'm sure there's some of you out there that go, oh man, let me tell you about the bad experience I had.
Yeah.
Great, whatever.
Email those to Josh.
At Stacking Chairs.
Or start a group, stackers at, poorly stacked chairs, whatever. But here's what I love. I love that it's an issue that has to be talked about, that can be talked about. And
no, we can't.
And mistakes that have happened or different doesn't mean we just avoid that situation, And so I appreciate you bringing this to the forefront.
It's fun to talk to.
It ended up being a good conversation. Yeah.
I'll be honest with you. Some part I'm like, oh my goodness, I can't believe this stuff happened, but but again, but I love the team that got us put together to kind of make those things.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Well, we're going to move now into small group. And today for small group, we if you don't know small groups, the time we talk about, things are going well, things are going bad, whatever's happening in youth ministry, that's what we're talking about. It's small group. Today, I just want to hear about Jason, what are you doing with your youth group? I mean, tell if you guys haven't heard Jason in previous episodes, tell us a little bit about your ministry personally in your church, but then also just the ministry I would dare to share. Just want to hear a little bit about it.
Absolutely, yeah. So I for several years at Storyline had been serving as a small group boys leader and was actually my son's small group leader, which was super cool. And then this last year, we have a role within our small group structure, a small group coach. And so now, as opposed to being in that small group investing in the lives of those students, I am encouraging and investing in the lives of our adult leaders, which is a lot of fun.
Oh, great.
And so it's cool to get to do that. And so, I love Morgan and Matt, our two youth leaders at our church. They've got a great vision for student ministry and reaching the 14,000 students that are in our community. We figured out how many middle schools and high schools were in our community, how many kids go to church, how many kids don't, 14,000 don't. And so we got a really clear vision of what we're pushing our youth group toward. And so it's really, really awesome. That resonates with me. To the other half of your question of that I serve at Dare to Share Ministries is my full-time vocation. Absolutely love what I get to do there, training and equipping youth leaders here in the United States and all over the world toward this idea of gospel advancing and becoming gospel advancing leaders. And so, as I mentioned earlier, things like Lead the Cause, Dare to Share Live, from an event standpoint, all of our digital curriculum and resources are free on our website. And so again, thinking of those 70% of all youth leaders are volunteer, free resources. And so, which is encouraged to the extent that it could benefit you. Check it out, daretoshare.org for those resources and those types of things. And then I know, and this isn't just because I'm on their podcast, but love Kyle and Josh and love all of Word of Life Ministries. Dare to Share and Word of Life have a strong partnership. And it's because we're about the same things. And so Word of Life's got some extraordinary resources from curriculum throughout the year. Their app, their quiet times are off the charts good. Please check out QT from World of Life. It's so good.
And the designs on the quiet times are starting next year. My wife is in charge of the designs for the quiet times next year.
Awesome.
So if you like them,
That's awesome. So here's what I love. I love there's a lot of our curriculum that has a lot of Dare to Share elements implemented into them. Take 5 for the Cause, the Circle, all those different things. But then even us at camp, there's constant times I'm going, hey, Jason, what do you guys have in this? The last 3 summers, our Thursday night has been heavily influenced at summer camp of how are you going to go home and begin gospel-centered conversations? And so one year we did, hey, we're going to walk through Prayer, Care, Share, Gospel Circle, taking 5 for the Cause. How can you do that personally, but how can you do that in your youth group? And we've seen some youth groups run with that. We did the AAA method of Ask, Admire, Admit.
To start a gospel conversation.
Conversation. Then last summer, we did a kind of 50,000 foot view, 30,000 foot view on the top 5 other religious philosophies outside of Christianity.
That's right, I remember.
And it was awesome to be able to go. And I said to my guy that was putting it together, I said, here's the deal. I need you to do the research on what they've researched, but you don't have to do it from ground zero, which is so important. Listen, guys.
I love that. So good.
Pay attention to the people that have done the work for you that you can take advantage of their study. Please go do the study yourself. But go off of what they've studied so you don't have to start from ground zero, which is what I absolutely love. Now, Jason and I actually even have a deeper connection, or excuse me, Storyline and I have a deeper connection.
Why don't we have a deeper connection?
Jason,
Like you started there, I was like, oh, sweet, and then it became storyline. And wow.
because you're the youth pastor
Seriously?
at your church.
I feel like Josh right now.
The youth pastor at
How did I get roped into this?
So the youth pastor at the church was a kid that I did some discipleship with when he was in high school.
True story.
Nice.
So their youth pastor went to my church when I watched this kid grow up. And so what's really, really cool is every once in a while I'll interact with Jason and be like, hey, how's Matt doing?
Yeah.
Another youth pastor named Matt.
Yeah. Oh my
Another
gosh.
pastor named Matt.
Classic. You know, that story would have been better if it was just about your connection with Jason.
Hey, so Jason and I actually,
I'm sorry, Josh. I feel like I need to apologize.
so Jason sent me a thing and said, yo, I met this kid, Matt McDermott, at a Dare to Share Live event. And I was like, what? That's so crazy. I know Matt. And so now
right.
Matt is the youth pastor
cool.
at their church.
Yeah.
So yeah.
That sounded just pure chaos. I
You
don't
know
know if
what?
anybody actually heard any of
You
that.
know what? I love you all.
All right, that's been Small Group, and that's been Stacking Chairs. Guys, thanks so much for listening.
Stackers.
Thanks for listening, Stackers. Thank you, Jason, for being here.
Love it, guys.
Are we going to continue that?
Stackers?
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Josh, when is our merch line going to come out?
Ooh.
We got to reassess, if this podcast is going to be worth it. No, I'm kidding. Of course. Let's do it. Let's do it.
41 episodes in.
41 episodes. We're done. No.
Wow.
No, join us again next week. We'll be back with another speaker. We might do an episode in between.
That's right. That's right.
But yeah.
I think if you guys took a week off, you should double down 1 week.
double down.
A double stack.
Oh.